I think it's safe to say that no other Pokemon has fallen from grace as hard as Talonflame. That we have one of the most used Pokemon, one of the most feared Pokemon in the 6th generation being cast into almost complete obscurity with just one little change in the 7th generation. And that's what this video is about. We're going to be looking into Talonflame to see if a Pokemon that is so strong can actually be made so bad off of one change, or if everyone's just kind of given up on the Pokemon, that they see these changes, they go, well, that means Talonflame's bad, I'm not even going to try it, or is Talonflame just actually really bad in the 7th generation? So that's why I'm on the Pokemon Global link. I want to see what people are using Talonflame for, just see if we have any changes, and it already starts off with some good signs, because Talonflame is a very hard to predict Pokemon, and it's even harder to predict with this Gale Wings change, because you see a Talonflame, and you have to go, right, what did this thing do, and what can it do now that it's nerfed? So it has a little bit of the element of surprise. Is it going to use Taunt and shut down your setup? Is it going to Will-O-Wisp your physical attacker? It now uses Tailwind more often. Like, this is a single set. In double battles, we see Tailwind pretty much all the time, but in single battles, there is some Tailwind usage, so that is making it to where you have to wonder what Talonflame is up to. Is it trying to blow the Gale Wings, get a Tailwind before it dies, and then bring speed to the rest of the team, or is there something else at play here? Also, some of them are still running Roost on those bulkier sets, a big drop in Swords Dance usage, and then we do have some special attackers. That way you just eventually beat down the Ferrothorn with a Flamethrower, or the Overheat, since really Overheat into like Flare Blitz or anything like that, you can find enough combos to get the job done. So that's how the Talonflame is looking, and we also have to look, is the Gale Wings nerf actually that bad? That Talonflame is the 25th fastest Pokemon in the game, and when you look at a lot of the Pokemon above it, it's Mega Evolutions and Legendaries. So a lot of the Legendary Pokemon, they're just not really going to matter in this discussion because they are restricted. However, the buff to Mega Pokemon has nerfed Talonflame quite a bit, because now we have Manectric. Manectric used to eat a Flare Blitz and die, but now Manectric is just going to be able to outspeed Talonflame on that initial turn, because it becomes a 135 speed Pokemon instantly. Same with the Lopunny. That Lopunny now has extra chances to coverage and do damage to the Talonflame, and then just the introduction of Tapu Koko. So it seems like speed-wise, Talonflame does have some issues, but then again, even if you're running a Jolly Nature and Gale Wings isn't active, you outspeed all of these Pokemon down here, and most of them are going to be frail sweeping Pokemon. You outspeed them, you hit them hard enough, and then they just die anyways. Also, for that one turn of Gale Wings, you can compete with these Pokemon, that you have the chance to outspeed Gengar and just nuke it immediately, but you are more vulnerable to getting revenge. And then Pheromosa. Pheromosa is a big, scary Pokemon, but it is 4 times weak to the flying, so Talonflame absolutely gets to devastate it with the priority onto the Pheromosa. And that's kind of where things start to show some weirdness, because Talonflame also has access to the Flyinium Z. Is Flyinium Z a buff to Talonflame because you can maintain your Gale Wings and still find a KO? So you go Z Brave Bird, KO. Well, you don't take recoil because it becomes Supersonic Sky Strike. So now you can use Brave Bird under priority again, and then you could still survive a hit, and now you're a fast Pokemon. So Talonflame still has a good chance to 1-for-1 or 2-for-1 and maybe get a little more. That it can taunt shut down a setup Pokemon because they're generally going to be slower, and even then you're 126 base speed Pokemon. So really anything above you is just going to be speeding sweepers or pranksters, which already gave you a problem to begin with, and then you just have Flare Blitz, Brave Bird, Taunt, and question mark insert moveset here. As we saw from Pokemon Global Link, your coverage and diversity is going to be all over the place, and that's kind of where we get to see the Gale Wings nerf at play, because we're not seeing as much Swords Dance Talonflame. That's just what dominated the game. Talonflame comes in, it uses Swords Dance, it uses Roost, it uses Swords Dance, it uses Roost, and now it still has priority to Brave Bird one-shot everything on your team. So that's kind of like the change to Talonflame. It's a more strategic change, it's a more mental change. That 120 speed, or 126 speed, we're outspeeding everything. It didn't get hit on the attack, it's not doing less damage. Talonflame isn't changed at all on the stats, so it's going to do the exact same things, it's just not always going to have the priority when it does it. So now that opportunity to come in and outspeed Talonflame, either a Scarf Pokemon, a fast sweeping Pokemon, a Mega Pokemon, all of that is there. So now Talonflame doesn't get to 6-0, but it still seems like a really scary Pokemon, especially with the bulk setup. But that's the issue. Gale Wings, you didn't have to invest in speed. You could actually make Talonflame a much tankier Pokemon on that Gale Wings. You could even run the Citrus Berry. Citrus Berry Talonflame lets you go into priority acrobatics on command. And that could be pretty crazy. But also, new Talonflame still has the opportunity to do that. Because with Gale Wings healing from full, it means that if you take less than 50% of your health, Roost will put you up to full. The one thing I've noticed about some bulk Talonflames is that you can't 2-hit KO it neutrally. So that means the Roost into Gale Wings is still going to be powerful. Also, if Talonflame is missing health and you have to switch out against it to deal with the Talonflame, well, now it roosts back up to full health and it refreshes on the Brave Bird. So I think it just kind of shows that, yeah, it was mostly the Swords Dance into Roost. But I think that that's still a possibility. Pretty much you just have to use Swords Dance a few more times, you know, sacrifice some of that attack investment, and then still go high defense and special defense, and you can still have Gale Wings with high damage on Talonflame. Citrus Berry is also going to be a very big boost. So Talonflame still does a lot of the Talonflame things that it used to do. Don't get me wrong, it's certainly still nerfed, but I think there's a lot of tools and creativity that can still be useful on Talonflame. You just lose a little bit of tankiness to go with a jolly max speed investment, which means you do lose damage from not having the adamant nature as well. So you are forced into that kind of position, which isn't favorable for the Talonflame, but yeah, it still has high amounts of damage. It still is a pretty ridiculous Pokemon, and also if you're going up against tankier Pokemon, setup Pokemon, even without any speed investment, or very minimal speed investment, you can still outspeed a lot of the Pokemon that you need to outspeed, so you still have the effective Gale Wings against a lot of Pokemon. That's one of my biggest comments about Talonflame in the 6th generation, is that I didn't feel Gale Wings made it super broken, because it's already a very fast Pokemon, and it's so hard to predict, you know, is it just running Choice Band Jolly Nature? That's always been a possibility on the Talonflame, so I rarely went into a Talonflame accepting that it probably doesn't have a Jolly Nature or any speed investment. So the mental games around the Talonflame are still going to be about the same, that is this one going to be speed to make up for Gale Wings, or is it just now sitting in as a tank Pokemon? A tank Pokemon that's less than 80 on all of its hit points and defensive stats. That's what Talonflame did to begin with. We saw Rocky Helmet Talonflame. We saw Leftovers Talonflame. We saw Bulk Up setup. You know, Talonflame is effectively doing the same things, it just doesn't have instant priority against a lot. And now it gets blown up by Tapu Koko. So maybe a couple of the metagame changes have nerfed Talonflame a bit, but still seems like a very scary and high damage Pokemon for sure. Now what I also want to do is look into some damage calculations. So Jolly Nature, Supersonic Sky Strike, this is just kind of saying the full offensive refresh Talonflame. You Sky Strike, then you Brave Bird, then you hope for the best. Well, it actually doesn't seem that strong of a Pokemon, so going up against Pokemon like Silvally, the damage is solid, but you are using your one and only Z move. So let's go and try out another Pokemon. Like, we'll encounter a Weavile at some point, so at least that's going to be it. The Supersonic Sky Strike, you have priority, you already outspeed the Weavile anyways, but pretty much whatever you're doing, you're still going to be able to KO it with a jolly Supersonic Sky Strike. Let's go and bring in the Greninja. Greninja's where things are also going to be a little tricky, because we do KO Greninja, however, our Brave Bird doesn't. So unless we have the Life Orb, unless we have something else going for us, we're not going to have enough damage to take out the Greninja, and then that's where we could just look at Choice Band. So Supersonic Sky Strike has a low-end damage of 71%. Well, if we're just going Choice Band, that's 67%. So effectively, Choice Band Talonflame has that 126. It is the 25th fastest Pokemon. So it's going to outspeed pretty much everything that it needs to, except for a few other Pokemon, and that's doing the same damage as the priority Supersonic Sky Strike. I think that's kind of what we need to consider right here, is that Choice Band Talonflame still comes in and it hurts a lot of Pokemon. Now we can see against the Greninja, yeah, we outspeed Greninja even without the Gale Wings, and then we still have KO potential with the Brave Bird. Same thing for anything as frail as Greninja, anything around that speed tier. Then we also get the 1 precision chance to use that Brave Bird against something that might have been faster, something that needs to go down. So I think that Choice Band Talonflame, it did get a little bit of nerf by being forced into Adamant, or forced into Jolly Nature over the Adamant, potentially. So maybe a 10% damage drop. You can tell that Game Freak wasn't happy with a generational bird having as much power and domination as Talonflame, but you can also tell that they still wanted Talonflame to be viable because they didn't hit the stats. They didn't nerf Brave Bird or Flare Blitz just because Talonflame existed. They didn't hit its attack stat or make it weaker in the base stat total. It's still a fast Pokemon, still does what it needs to do, it just Gale Wings only activates effectively one time when you're going for those offensive moves. So yeah, you can't sit as a Swords Dance Pokemon with Bulk and then also be the fastest bulky attacker, one-shot setup Pokemon ever. So I think it lost that. But I mean, it still seems like a very good Pokemon. I think that's what I'm going to say with this. That you can do some creative things. Still Taunt Shutdown, you can still Will-O-Wisp, you can still just be a bulky wall Pokemon. That near the end of the 6th generation, I saw as many Swords Dance Talonflame as I saw like Rocky Helmet Stall Talonflame. So that's why when you see it being so used, so feared, and so hated in the 6th generation, either one of two things happen. Either Talonflame wasn't that good to begin with, and the community just stagnated on it. They got caught up in like the Smogon mentality of, if everyone's using it and everyone says it's good, then I'm going to use it. Or maybe Talonflame was that good. And if it is the second case, if Talonflame was really as good as people say, and as feared and as hated as people say, people wanting this Pokemon banned because they just can't deal with it, then there's no way that it is as bad as people say right now. It should be getting much more usage because it plays about the same. So I guess I'll put in my notes on the Talonflame, and I'll just say that it's really balanced, honestly. That, okay, it's a little easier to shut down now, but it's still a Pokemon that has sweeping potential, provides utility, has unpredictability, and it just runs very consistently. It's a solid Pokemon. So I guess I'll just end the video here. I can't really say much else except that it's good, it's solid, and it's just without priority, because that's it. It's still a Talonflame without priority, and Talonflame was that scary to begin with to a degree, so it should still have some of that power inside of it, and people just kind of wrote it off a little too soon. So there we go, guys, and also this is VGC legal. Maybe there's a hidden VGC strat that can still work with the Talonflame. So there you go. Hope you all enjoyed the video, taking a look at Talonflame for the 7th generation. I hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.